to suggest that the Turkish get-up is not an absolutely brilliant exercise is very, very challenging to me. However, I do not disagree that I could probably think of a lot longer list of exercises that would be very, very focused on hypertrophy other than the Turkish get-up. I get it, I understand. Turkish get-up would probably be something that I would like to see in every single person's program, top to bottom. But what I mean by that, nobody said you had to have a 48 kilo kettlebell, start on your back, get up to stand, and come back down. Nobody said that. But there could be a component, and it may be some of those components could have a 48 kilo kettlebell while others are done naked, meaning there's no kettlebell. You should still be wearing clothes. So that one of the cool things about the get-up is that nobody said you had to do the whole movement. And part of the reason why you may choose to not do the whole movement, you're clearly not doing this directly for hypertrophy. I'll get to, maybe there is a link to that down the road. But the get-up itself is entirely, maybe not, I don't want to use the word diagnostic. It's not entirely diagnostic. It is entirely informative of a lot of different things, especially when you might subscribe to, I don't want to use this movement screen, or I'll use the warm-up to evaluate. Again, entirely flawed on that piece. There is content on that we would say as to why using your warm-up instead of a movement screen or a movement evaluation is a dumb idea. I think I did an entire webinar on that, by the way, years ago. But the get-up itself is going to look at varying levels of shoulder mobility. Anytime you're going to be looking at shoulder mobility, both from an open chain, closed chain, phasic versus stabilizing, you're also going to comment on scapular stability. You're also going to comment on thoracic rotation. I mean, just think of the first move. Roll to elbow. You got to have some thoracic motion there already. All I have to do is roll to elbow and start to learn a little bit. And maybe I'll learn different things if I progressively add weight. Obviously, I'm going to have deeper expressions of shoulder mobility and stability when I get up to the hand. Now I got a lot of, if I use the high bridge, or even if I don't, I'm going to learn a lot about my posterior chain. I'm going to learn a lot about, can I extend in my hip without extending in my lumbar spine? And maybe when that becomes a weak link, and maybe you even found that weak link from something else, doing that giant bridge up and down, maybe doing that giant bridge without the long leg, without that phasic side, and hold it up in the air. Because remember, you got to get it up in the air, and you're not allowed to create any noise. And yeah, that's how we would coach it, to sweep through to get to that tripod position. Obviously, hip extension is now in play as you go from that tripod position to half kneeling. Leg strength, ankle mobility, toe mobility on the back. I've seen people do very, very heavy get-ups with a planar flex back foot because I never told them that they had to do it a different way. That's very, very impressive, even though they are using their foot, but they're not using their toe. Interesting. You'll have the toe on that giant step back on the way down. Strength and stability to hold the bell over your head. We will always try to do some type of walk in between, clearly linking some work capacity to that shoulder. We might not be learning a ton about the lower body, but we're going to learn a lot about every single position is going to tell us something about pain. And it's not going to be diagnostic. It's not going to make a lot of sense as to where that pain is coming from. No. The get-up is not dumb. I understand that I probably should be doing a lot of other things if I'm specifically looking to have Death Star shoulders, but to have stable shoulders and then show up to something else, that's the thing with the get-up. If you can do get-up, you're telling me a lot of really good things that probably are not being judged or evaluated to win your IFBB card. But that being said, if I know that's your foundation, I know that I will likely have an easier go of having deeper, fuller ranges of motion where we know that hypertrophy is probably going to be more easily accessed. But get-ups and then double get-ups, we call them rocket launcher get-ups because you kind of have to do this little somersault almost to get going because you have two kettlebells in the rack. And then you sink your press overhead. So to get up, you have two kettlebells over your head, which is, for my dollar, one of the more impressive physical views in powerlifting. And I think Dave Tate said this, when you're at a meet and you're looking, you're sizing everybody up, is the dudes that look jacked from behind are the ones that are going to win the meet. And obviously to see a belt cranked when you force that V, that's a big time look. To hold 2 decent sized kettlebells over your head is an impressive look to my eye from behind, and then go for a walk. And obviously there's significant abdominal strength in that, maintaining that bent knee abdominal hollow to get up and down. But to build up all that work capacity, to build up all that stabilization, particularly through the shoulders, I'm probably going to be able to do that elusive behind the neck pull down. I'm going to be able to really put the pin all the way at the bottom to do my machine shoulder press. I'm probably going to be able to touch the dumbbell to my biceps when I'm doing my bench press instead of just touching my chest. If I'm really good at doing get up, is it worth getting better at the get up when your goals are more aesthetic? That's probably not. I'm on your side on that one. But to suggest that building up work capacity with load, golly, how about putting on a weight vest and then doing some get-ups? Again, you need space, you need kettlebells, which may not fit other forms of training goals. But I think get-up would probably be in the category, are you going to win IFBB? No. But if that's the only exercise that you had, it's almost like a cheat code, since you're doing a lot of different things. You've got, a 1-arm floor press. You've got all sorts of static shoulder work. And remember too, I've heard other people use these terminologies, where you stop and hold these different positions, you work the neck, get up to the 4th power. What does that mean? Get up to the 4th power is that you do 4 roll to elbow before you go up to post. Get up with 5 breaths as a speed bump. So you probably can't hold that 48 kilo anymore, but if you could, you're a monster. Where if you stop at each of the 7 checkpoints going up and down and nail 5 really impressively coached diaphragmatic breaths, you're doing something really impressive for a number of things, not just to mention work capacity, that will carry over to any type of training. Years ago, somebody asked me about what would be the training program for bodybuilding if you were going to use the anti-glycolytic stuff. And I'm like, I don't think there's an answer to that. I don't, because it doesn't click. But if you told me what your bodybuilding program was going to be, whether it's 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 24 weeks, whatever it is, if you showed me what that was, I could build out a previous 12 to 24 weeks of something like an EPP to give you bodybuilding specific work capacity so that you could do more reps, use more weight, more quality sets, more quality cycles, etc., etc. I think that's very possible, and the get up could potentially live somewhere else. Again, if you're going to use lots of uniplanar supported movements, which I am not against, which may surprise people, I'm not at all. I've used more of those recently over the last several years for given a lot of reasons. My point would be is that doing a get-up might be able to stave off any potential deleterious adaptations that decades of training that way may elicit. I don't think if you train with machines on your trip to Hawaii just to stay fresh, you're going to lose all your thoracic mobility. That's not what I'm saying. If you train that way your whole life, because that's the only way you knew how to train, then doing a get-up is going to be really hard, and it won't contribute to what the mirror looks like in the way you want it to. But people that can do heavy get-ups and heavy overhead stuff with kettlebells, they also look the part. It might not look the same to win an IFBB card, but they look the part, and it's a great combination of some of the gymnastic things that are very valuable for joint mobility and also legitimate strength. And just because the loads that you would use for a get-up or some of the other more well-known kettlebell activities appear to be a very small percentage of what the weight is on a barbell, you clearly don't understand what this unique thing is different, no differently than a dumbbell has different physics than a barbell. And the position of the load carriage, where it is in your base of support and how it's carriaged, is very different between all the different implements, and that's why there's different implements. I know very few people, if any, that can go pound for pound with a back squat versus a front squat. They're both double leg techniques. Well, why? Well, because the back squat, the bar is much more central to your base of support. Even if it's harder to hold, if you're a competent Olympic lifter, it's not harder to hold. You could do a no hands front squat, and we've seen that. We've seen no hands back squats. I think Kokliev did a no hands back squat with over 700 pounds. Now, he had to have unracked it. So take some of those factors out of it. The reality is a back squat, when you have to have a little bit of a forward lean, puts the barbell more central over your base of support, the center of your foot. The barbell is also within your base of support in the front squat position, in the rack, even with no hands, but it's less in your base of support, aside from the challenge of potentially carrying it, because you can do no hands on both. And then all of a sudden, let's say you can back squat 5 wheels, you can front squat 4 wheels. I am quite sure that you cannot take 2 200-pound kettlebells and do a front squat. I'm quite confident you can't do that. Why? Because the load is further outside of your base of support, even though you have carriage. You cannot do 2 200-pound dumbbells up on your shoulders, even if you have all the mobility through your triceps and lats. So they're all different pieces. I remember seeing this in the NFL. Some of the older coaches would be very, very much against. And years ago, one of the favorite podcasts I ever did, it was a couple guys from the UK. They really got on very, very well. I can't think of their names right now, so I apologize. I'm not sure they're still around, at least in the podcast world. Hopefully they're not dead. But it was somebody's like, I don't agree with kettlebells. What do you mean you don't agree? Like what are you talking about? It's a piece of iron. It's a piece of metal, right? It's sitting in front of you. You don't agree with it? I know anybody that agreed with a kettlebell with anything. It doesn't talk. But what they were really getting at of asking me to comment on this other person's lunatic statements was, look, the reality is if you're this highly influenced by one thing, whether it's hypertrophy, you're talking about the get up, or barbell training, so you're very influenced there, so then you're not going to like kettlebells because they're not as heavy. It's a different version of strong. And you cannot go pound for pound. That changes things. And it might change things for the better. When you talk about the smallest effective dose, the cousin statement that I would use more often would be lowest system load. Like, I want the lowest system challenge to achieve what I want. Meaning, I want to influence the environment as little as possible to get the maximum goal. Now, I can't do that with body weight unless it's somebody new. At some point, you got to load it up. But if I had a way to achieve everything that I wanted in terms of lower body strength, why would I not use a kettlebell that's lighter than whatever would be on the barbell? Okay, well, some of the answers would be, well, this young athlete has to do barbell technique when he gets to school. Okay, that's a very, very good reason to make sure they're ready to do that. But if I'm not married in any way to what I'm doing other than the internal adaptation, the internal load at a muscular level or a force production level on a force plate, I would love to be able to see that study that I'm not sure exists, to look at different movements where the external load is very, very different, and how does that translate to the force on the force plate? Because the force plate ain't gonna lie. Is it true that the amount of force that I'm creating, how much is it because I'm just carrying 500 pounds? But how does that equate if I carry much less weight? Maybe I could control this study for RPE. I hate RPE. I think it's silly. I don't think people genuinely know what a 10 is, but let's say you could. If my 8 out of 10 back squat is 500 pounds, but my 8 out of 10 double kettlebell front squat is, double 36s, I probably can't carry that. They're just too big for my size. So double 32s, I'm sure I've done. I don't know that would be an 8 for me. And then what does the force plate say? Because I'm showing up and I'm already losing. The force plate is already going to win with the 500-pound barbell versus the double 32s. Talking about kilos, that's 72 some pounds each, so we're in the 140s. So I think there's a lot of things to look at. We really began to examine the value of the Turkish get-up. I think maybe the biggest value is that if you hate and you can't find room for it, I think it is an entirely competent and entirely useful not diagnostic, but informative type of evaluation. I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe Dr. Ed Thomas's work, we should delve back into it, that the Spartans would, use the get-up as some type of evaluation where they had to do a get-up with some version of 106 pounds in order to get their shield. I don't know if that's a true story or not. It's not void of logic.